Dear Capcom, hi, it's me, Austin, and I've been stuck in my apartment for going on 2 weeks now because my city is under a shelter-in-place order due to the, the thing. I even, get this, got sick. It was just a cold though, figures I couldn't even get the famous thing. I just got a crappy old cold and my daycare is closed, so I've been trapped with my 3.5-year-old in my 1,500-ish square foot Chicago apartment for weeks, but I'm fine. I mean, I'm coping. I'm fine. This is fine. We're all fine. I'm definitely not going crazy. Maybe I'm not doing as well as I thought. Yeah, who cares? Do you know that there's a new Resident Evil remake coming out? It's my favorite entry in the series, Resident Evil 3, and I am so freaking pumped. But more importantly, it's an opportunity for me to finally reapproach a topic that I've left gathering dust for, wow, 3 years now, going on 4. Great. I am ancient. I had a crap ton of fun making this video, and it really introduced me to a lot of stuff I was previously unfamiliar with, but it always bugged me because huge aspects of it are 100% super duper wrong and stupid and wrong and bad and wrong and bad. And in order to understand why, we're gonna have to go back to the past to play the crappy vids that suck demonetization.
The entire United States would be completely overrun by flesh-eating monsters in little over a month.
Wrong.
And after that time, even if people died over 95% less to zombie attacks and got 1,000 times better at fighting them, the entire world's population would be reduced to 2% of its original total in just 6 months.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Okay, so the original premise of my first video on this subject was trying to figure out whether or not the ending of Resident Evil 3 was, like, a good idea or not. And to that end, I guess I gotta say that we have spoilers incoming right now. I mean, Resident Evil 3 is over 20 years old, so I feel like it doesn't need a spoiler warning, but there's also the remake, so like whatever. If spoilers bother you, this is your warning, capiche? Okay, so at the end of Resident Evil 3, the United States of America nukes Raccoon City in order to protect the nation from the zombie outbreak, and it seems like an overzealous reaction, right? I mean, Lord, just like put up a fence or something, right? Well, no, not really. Using the power of epidemiology, more specifically the tools of epidemic modeling, which I'll get into more later, I proved that the United States, if they didn't do something drastic, would fall to the zombie outbreak in little over a month, and the world itself would fall in just under a year, and it's here where I tremendously screwed up. You see, purely mathematical epidemiological models are great for predicting the spread of diseases in a small local community where there's a large group of people in a relatively small space. And to that end, before we go any further, let's go over our parameters, and then we'll get to the good stuff, including the part where I'm super wrong about everything, mostly, kinda. We're just gonna take for granted that zombies can exist even though they're plausibly ridiculous, and a moving, biting organism actually requires so many things to be working perfectly in tandem that they, in all honesty, really could not exist. Who cares? They exist. Deal with it. Now, zombies in the Resident Evil franchise are created by the T-virus, which is, you know, a virus. Glad we got that out of the way. The T-virus can be contracted in a number of ways, and while the most common way of acquiring it, at least in a widespread outbreak, is from getting bitten by a zombie, the initial outbreak in Raccoon City is actually caused by the virus spreading to the local water supply. We'll be mostly ignoring that for now, but it is important to keep in mind for later. Approximately 10% of the human population is naturally immune to the T-virus and are utterly unaffected by it, which is great for humans because it reduces the rate of infection, but it's bad for me because I have to include it in my math and it makes everything way harder. Anyway, a person who's infected will, within a matter of an hour or so at the fastest, or days at the longest, eventually turn into a zombie. Usually they appear to die first, which is actually what causes the massive outbreak to begin with. Doctors were like, dang, all these people keep dying, I guess we'll just put them in a big pile over here. Then all of a sudden they get back up and the doctors are like, oh look, we were super wrong. They're not actually dead. Ow! Ouch! Why? Why did you bite me? Then eventually they become zombies and etc. etc. You've seen zombie stuff, you get it. Standard epidemiology tools can actually be used to model outbreaks like this with a bit of tweaking. The standard model is what's known as the SIR model. It's not called that because it's super into the lifestyle, but because it's an acronym for 3 buckets that are the most useful for the studiers of contagious diseases. It's short for susceptible, infected, and removed. Basically, anyone who can be infected by a disease falls into the susceptible bucket. If they get sick, then they move into the infected bucket, and when they're no longer contagious, either because they're recovering or dead, they get moved to the removed bucket because they're removed from affecting the spread of the disease. What determines how you move from one bucket to another? Differential calculus. Fun! It uses what's known as a coefficient to determine how the numbers change, and while this sounds scary, it's actually not that bad. Basically, if there are more infected people, susceptible people are more likely to get sick, which makes sense, right? So in order to figure out how many people move from the S bucket to the I bucket, you multiply them together and tack on the coefficient, which is basically a number that says, when these two numbers come together, how likely are the numbers to change? This is useful to organizations like the CDC because their job essentially is to lower the coefficient as much as they can, since they can't actually change the number of people who are currently infected and who's currently susceptible. So, for example, if nothing is done, let's say the coefficient is 1. This is an absurdly high number, but let's just never mind that. But if the CDC does a massive hand washing campaign, they can drop the coefficient down to, say, 0.75. Do videos on how to properly cough into your elbow or into a tissue and then dispose of it? You can lower it to 0.5. Congress passes a stimulus package that allows people to stay quarantined in their homes without missing rent? You've dropped it down to 0.1. All these things can dramatically mitigate the impact of an illness, and most of what epidemiologists try to do is figure out which actions will affect the coefficients the most for as little money and effort as possible. Make sense? Now, this basic 3-bucket model won't do it all for us, and as a result, our math is tremendously more complicated. If the standard epidemiology model is called the SIR model, I present to you the SINSD model. For all your local community-driven zombie apocalypse epidemiological modeling needs, this beast is complicated and very prone to breaking, but I have mostly wrangled it for my purposes. It contains not 3 buckets, but 5, which may not sound like that many more, but trust me, it is a bloody nightmare to balance us all. We have our susceptible population, which is the same as before. We got infected, which are folk who are infected with the virus. We've got a separate side bucket for the 10% of the population that's immune. Then Z is for zombies, and D is dead for, you know, the things that are dead. People move from the susceptible to the infected bucket based on a coefficient relative to the susceptible population size and the current amount of zombies, while zombies and immune folk move from their buckets to the dead bucket directly based on coefficients between the zombies and the total population of living humans and coefficients between zombies and the immune populations, respectively. What else? Oh, right, the immune move from the infected to the zombie buckets at a steady, flat rate based on how many infected there are, and I think that's it. Let me count real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4 coefficients. Yep, that's all of them. Whew, boy. For my purposes, the infected population only includes those who are infected to the point where they're bedridden or effectively unable to impact the population. Alrighty, this is all good, and with these numbers, we can really accurately measure and show off the Raccoon City outbreak really, really well, which I did in my first video if you want to check it out. But it's when you try to expand past small communities where you run into problems. And boy, did I mess up there. You simply cannot use SIR models to model entire countries, let alone the entire world. Bad 2016, Austin. As articulated very concisely in the MIT paper, You Can Run, You Can Hide, the epidemiology and statistical mechanics of zombies, when it comes to the limitations of SIR modeling, until now, we have considered fully connected, well-mixed populations where any infected individual can infect any susceptible individual with equal probability. But surely, a zombie in New York cannot bite someone in Los Angeles. I could not have said that better myself. And this is actually the problem with a lot of diseases. The answer that most models come up with to fix this is to integrate a metric called kilometers per year that a disease can spread from one community to another. In short, diseases of all kinds require one thing: proximity. But finally, after 3 years of waiting and days, and I mean this literally days of rendering simulations and manually crunching numbers in an entirely new way, I have a brand new model, and let me tell you something. This thing is freaking awesome. In order to simulate a Raccoon City outbreak, I had to pick a starting point for our infection. There's no set location in the real world, but given that it's specified that Raccoon City is in the heartland of America and it's near mountains, the internet's best guess is Springfield, Missouri, which works for me. This is where our outbreak starts, with 78,350 infected, 9,320 zombies, and 535 survivors. In order to reach new communities, the zombies are gonna have to walk. The slowest average human walkers, which is basically how quickly a zombie walks, goes at roughly 2.7 miles per hour. Moving outwards in a circle kind of randomly, it'll take a zombie leaving Springfield, Missouri, roughly 10 days to reach my town of Chicago, Illinois. Let's just stop for a second and let me explain this visual before moving on. The red part looks really scary, and to be fair, it should, but it isn't actually red for every zombie on the map. Rather, the red only shows how far the T-virus has spread. An area that turns red is still impacted by the singed model, and there's still a chance for people to fight back and reduce the zombie population. That said, once they reach a major population center, our numbers start to go berserk. Day 10, zombies have spread to Chicago. Day 18, Dallas. 30 days in, Philadelphia, Toronto, Hamilton, Houston, New York City, and San Antonio all have zombies in them, and our numbers have begun to explode. We'll get to those in a minute, but let's skip ahead to day 40, where my original video ended and I said the entire United States would be infected by. As you can see, that's not even close to true. About 2/3 of North America is impacted by the T-virus right now, but using our coefficients and our buckets, only about 40% of the United States has died, only 2% is infected, and only about 21% are zombies, which I mean is really bad. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like everyone is zombies or dead by a long shot. That said, you may start to realize a problem just looking at the map as it is right now. Bombs are not gonna fix this problem. The reason a nuke even worked in the first game is because all the zombies were concentrated in one spot. Now, zombies are spread over 5.5 million square kilometers. At an average blast zone of 113-ish square kilometers, this outbreak would already strain the supply of nuclear weapons in the entire world at the height of the Cold War, requiring almost 50,000 nuclear bombs to clear out this space. Right now we'd be screwed since there's only about 13,000 in the entire world. Yikes! And so, our zombies trudge on, barely abated by individual communities spreading, getting worse, and overtaking the entirety of the contiguous United States in 4 months. A few interesting things are happening right now, though. You'll notice that they don't quite make it to Alaska. That's kind of neat. And down here, this bottleneck, that's Panama. This is a huge strategic advantage for South America. And if they can muster enough forces here, they may be able to stop the zombies from spilling into their continent. Unfortunately, once the occupants of Mexico City, one of the most populated metropolitan areas in the entire world, is converted into a horde of zombies, there's no stopping it. And just shy of the 1-year mark on day 324 after Raccoon City's outbreak, they pour into South America like a swarm of locusts. And while South America has a much lower population density than North America, it has a ton of cities. The plague spreads much slower down here, but thanks to their concentrated cities, huge blooms of infection spread. And just over a year and a half after the Raccoon City incident, the entirety of the Americas, save for Alaska, has zombies in it. And on day 645, our very last survivor dies, and it is all over. The problem is, once a zombie horde has established itself, you have very limited time to contain it, or your chance of survival drops to 0 on a long enough timeline. I mean, how do you even deal with this? How many unmanned drones, carpet bombings, and nukes are you willing to drop to clear out this infestation? At least Europe, Asia, and Africa are safe. Or are they? Because guess what? They ain't! Because you forgot something that I did not, because I am actually crazy and have spent 129 hours of caffeine-driven time working on this monstrosity, and the thing that you forgot is this: the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream is an ocean current that brings warm water up from around Florida up to northwestern Europe, and it's one of the reasons the United Kingdom isn't a frozen wasteland 365 days a year. And remember, the T-virus is waterborne, meaning that once it hits the coast, it can travel, either in the form of the raw virus in the ocean or by, zombies who tried to go swimming and got pulled away. It takes a while, though. At an average speed of 4 miles per hour, once the zombies hit the coast, it'll take at least 68 days days until the virus reaches the UK, France, and then swoops down to Africa. The zombies reach Savannah, Georgia by day 18, and Europe and Africa by day 112, and from then, it's all over, folks. It spreads everywhere, and by day 575, it has spread everywhere zombies can feasibly reach on foot, with some exceptions. Specifically, Japan, Alaska, Australia, and Madagascar might be safe if experts realize that the virus can be waterborne and take proper precautions, and guarantee that we ignore that the T-virus can infect tons of different kinds of animals, not just humans, like birds and fish. That said, I didn't actually run the exact numbers on how long it would take for every human in the affected populations of Africa, Europe, and Asia to actually die, because I was running all the numbers manually based on population density, and after spending 3 days on the Americas, I was not gonna do the rest of the world. I think it's safe to say that they'd be toast by, what, year 4? Tops? I don't know. Maybe I'll do it again in another 3 years to perfect it. So what can we learn from this? A lot, actually. Stopping a disease in its tracks as early as possible can prevent a global snowball effect that will end up impacting exponentially, no, logarithmically more people than the initial outbreak. Lowering coefficients, whether it's person-to-person contact or in the case of zombies, shooting them in the head and destroying the brain, can do a ton to reduce the spread of disease, because once diseases hit a tipping point, they can very, very quickly become out of control and kill millions of people. Thankfully, zombies could never exist. Whew! What's that? Oh God. Sincerely, Austin. Hey there, huge shout out to Zach Stu, one of Matt's writers who helped get me on the right track and pointed me in the direction of Zombie Town USA, a super fun website made by the MIT academics who wrote the paper I referenced in my video. Give a thumbs up for Zach doing me a solid, and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. I'm gonna go take a nap.